Well, I appreciate that introduction, Larry. You did it exactly as I asked. That was a great PT session this morning. I sensed the camaraderie. I enjoyed it, and you could see that first class is really trying to own that. I mean, that's good. That's what you want them to do. So I thought I'd talk about just a couple things, and then I'd open it up to whatever you guys want to talk about. I will answer any question that you ask as best I can. The invitation to come here, I didn't realize when I got and I don't remember if Derek had sent me the email or if Larry did, but it was, hey, do you realize we have this many sailors here in Georgia? Never knew that. It did. And probably at that time, the number was might have been a lot less. But still, I used to go out of my way to visit sailors that were kind of off the beaten path. Because you got sailors doing great things all over the place. Yeah, you can go to San Diego, you can go to Norfolk, but you should come to Augusta, Georgia, and interact with those sailors. So, I'm pleased with the opportunity to do that and to speak at tonight's ball. A couple things. You talk about Deckplate leadership, and it was actually on the Frank Cable. Frank Cable was probably the biggest leadership challenge I ever had. It was. It wasn't. It was for many reasons, but it was a community. So I'm a surface guy, and so I'm coming. There's a surface ship owned by the sub community. And it ran a little bit different than what I was used to. And the CO was from the submarine, was a submariner. And, I questioned a lot of things. Well, why are we doing this? What Navy is this? But they did some things that were very regimented that didn't make sense to me. So I had been a command master chief on a guided missile destroyer, kind of, the Gucci ships of the fleet. Sleek, great mission. Get into the Frank Cable, it's a repair ship, it's a support ship. But those sailors need to take pride in what they're doing. As much pride as the sailors on the pointy end on that DDG, they needed to take pride, and I didn't see that there. But there was things very regimented there, and I remember we had this XO there, and XO ran field day. And so I'd get out and walk about during field day, and I recall once there was a first class petty officer. As I walked around this passageway, he was like rubbing this one spot on the boat. And so I make my rounds around the ship to see that. And one thing I didn't see a lot of chiefs out there. And I didn't see a lot of leadership out there, but I saw sailors going through the motion. So an hour later, after making a tour through the ship to look at, that first class is still there, same exact spot, rubbing on the... And I said, shipmate, what are you doing? He says, well, CMC, I'm doing field day. I said, well, you were there, an hour ago. And he said, well, field day is 3 hours. I'm done. It took me 30 minutes to get it done. But, XO says we have to be out here doing it, so I'm just, rubbing a hole in this bulkhead. So then I went and I walked around. Then I go to the offices. I start opening offices, office doors. And who's sitting in there? A lot of the chiefs were sitting in there, a lot of the leadership. There was no one out there taking charge of that. It was missing something. And was the ship any cleaner for it? No, I don't think so. So I went up and we had a new CO, and I said, look, I want to do something. And so I brought this subject up, and and they said, well, field day gives us time to catch up on all our admin stuff, and crews out there cleaning. So I told the CO, hey, let's shut down the computer system. Let's shut down the land system while field day goes on. So I got to get folks out there. I want you to send a message that this is a ship evolution. Everyone takes part. And man, it pissed a lot of people off. And especially the supply guys who constantly had to be on there, for whatever reason. But I tell you, we went from a 3-hour block. It took us about an hour to clean that ship. Because you think about how much you guys have been out there. How much you do sweepers, so many times a day. You're always cleaning. You shouldn't take half a day to clean something that you're constantly cleaning anyway. And so it got done in about an hour's time, and then you could do other things. You know, I could use that time for training. I could cut people loose instead of wasting sailors' time. So you can't accept the norm. And you have to do what's right by people. And especially if you keep that focus. Now, how motivated do you think that first class was? What do you think he thought of the leadership there? Why isn't anyone taking charge? And then you had the chiefs on the deck plate out there leading it, teaching something. So it became, and it reminded me of that today, you know, it was almost seamless of what happened this morning with the PT. And at one point, it became seamless. Just with that cleaning evolution, a field day is an opportunity to train, to interact, and develop. It's what you make of it. I was, we were riding over here, and someone asked me, did you ever aspire to be MCPON? You know, I honestly don't think they did a very good background check or something. I was amazed at, with the opportunity, but I didn't. It's not something, I mean, you know, sometimes it's luck. Sometimes it's, you know, being at the, someone said it this morning, right place, right time. I was a student at the War College. And I'd gone to the War College because I wanted to see what they wanted chiefs to do. And there was a lot of talk around that time about blurring the lines. Do you guys, any of you guys remember that? Mm-hmm. Blurring the lines. I'm a command master chief out in a ship. Blurring the lines, I wanted chiefs to be clear and distinct what was expected of them. I don't want to blur any lines. I thought if you blurred the lines, you blurred expectations. So I see this opportunity to go to the War College, and I think, okay, I want to see what's going on. What are we trying to do with Master Chiefs and learning? It was a great learning experience. I didn't start off very well. I got there, and I really wasn't embraced by my classmates. And there was 4 of us that they put through. First time in the history, I think it was at that time 125 or 150 years old. I mean, and if you know anything about the history of that institution, you know, our Navy's greatest leaders had walked the halls there. And there's a lot of pride and prestige there. So then you got to, now you got 4 enlisted people going there. What's that going to do? There were some people on that staff that felt, oh my God, there goes the neighborhood. You know, I mean, but I didn't approach it the right way. So I go into, you break up into these seminars, most of your things, it's a master's program, and you break up into these seminars, and they engage in different topics, and I would try to answer questions or engage as I thought an officer would. And these were 05s, 06s. I tried to think that then. It's totally against everything. I mean, I didn't have the background, but I thought in order to pass, to fit in, I had to do that. So about a month into it, and these guys would look at me like, man, who's this clown? And then about a month into it, I was telling my wife, I went back home, and she'll be at the ball tonight. I told her, I said, Diane, I think we made a mistake coming here. I think this is out of my league. I don't know, you know. I said, my classmates, you know, I talked to the other master chiefs. They're not having any better luck than I am. And so I told her what I just told you guys. And she said, well, I don't think you're here. I don't think to think like them. I think they want to hear from you as a master chief. I mean, what is your view as a senior enlisted? Man, the light went on. So I went back and I started engaging that way, and our seminars became some of the longest there because nobody wanted to leave. We'd engage in things. I would give my perspective as a senior enlisted, which was different, and I felt they were learning too. And it caught on. I became kind of a popular guy on campus, you know. So who is this Master Chief, you know? And I created some great relationships, you know, and made it through the course, but about 2 months before graduation, and I would interact with everyone. I knew everyone there. About 2 months before graduation, the provost of the school, so they have a president of the school who was an admiral, and then they have the provost who's the next in charge. He calls me to his office and he says, look, Master Chief, we want you to give one of the lunchtime lectures. I want you to talk about the role of the senior enlisted. I want you to give your views, talk about some of those things that I hear you're talking about and, you know, espousing around the school. So we want you to engage with that. A couple of the officers thought it'd be a good lecture. And 60% of the student body is Navy, and the rest is Army, Air Force, Marine, and international students. Countries all over the world. So I thought, great, I can do it. And the thing about it, I would have been the first enlisted to address the student body, And so this lecture, it was called a leadership series. They were optional because it ran like any other school. You went to the class you had to go to, then usually you headed home to do your studying, your reading. But people would hang around for those lectures because we used to get folks like, General Petraeus when he was a 2-star. And these guys would come in and just talk about, non-attribution, and just talk about things that they were seeing from their perspective. And so they were pretty popular. Colin Powell's chief of staff when he was chairman, some revealing insight to all those things. So they were pretty popular. So the day of the lecture comes, and they were usually held in this one auditorium. And I walk through the green room, and I walk out to the platform, and it's empty. Nobody's there. And I stood there, and I thought, I thought I was making something. Nobody's interested. I mean, what happened here? I thought, not one person showed up to the lecture. And, I felt a little bit frustrated, a little bit hurt, and I thought, those SOBs, it's just... And so I walk out the door, out the door that I came in, and I go into I walk to where the general population walks in. There was a sign on the door. It said, lecture moved to Spruance Hall, which is the largest auditorium at the War College. And I have to tell you, I walked in, it was packed. It was packed. So I took the stage, and I talked to them, and I gave my view of senior enlisted and what our role was. And it was such a dynamic exchange from all services about the role that they value that senior enlisted play in our military, not just the Navy. There's expectations that they have of us, and the trust and confidence that they put in our senior enlisted community. And some of the questions were pretty challenging, but you know what? I've been chief that had gone through the process of going through initiation, induction, or 365, whatever you're going to call it. I was ready for that. And I stood there and I felt I was representing, our community. But it shaped my view. It shaped my view, those interactions, and it solidified my thinking that you can't blur the lines. Those lines have to be crystal clear. And if you remember at that time, they were doing where chiefs were division officers on a ship. And, well, can a chief be a division officer? Of course a chief could be a division officer. The question you have to ask yourself is, do you want chiefs being division officers, or do you want chiefs training division officers? So I think if anything, the Navy got anything right, it was that chief-division officer relationship in growing that young officer up. Why screw that up? And chiefs got other things to do. So it really solidified my thinking. And so another month goes by, I'm waiting, I'm trying to get an assignment so I could use all this great joint education that I had. I wanted to go to a joint command. And I went to joint I got orders, right about a few days before I graduated, to the Joint Task Force at Guantanamo Bay. I don't know if any of you have been there, but it was a very interesting place. We had a lot of folks there at the time, and very challenging environment for our sailors and soldiers, Marines, people that worked there, especially those that interacted with the prisoners on a daily basis. It was a very high incident of PTS there because of the stress of that environment and the things that they couldn't do back. On a battlefield, you could shoot back. There you couldn't. You had to restrain yourself. And it was pretty interesting. So I was excited about going there. I get this call. So this goes to the question, did I ever aspire to be MCPON? I got a call to go visit the president of the college. And this is right before graduation. I thought, shit, I'm not going to graduate. Something. Just going to see the president of the college was never a good thing. If you had to go up and see the admiral, any student that had to go up to see the admiral, you never saw that student again. There's an empty desk. And so I tried to find out. There was a chief, there was a yeoman in there, chief yeoman. I said, hey man, what's your? I have no idea. So I go up and see Admiral Shuford. He sits down, he starts talking to me and asks me about my time there and what I thought of it. And I'm waiting for that shoe to drop. Well, you didn't cut it. Your last paper wasn't worth anything. And then he asked me, "Have you ever thought about being the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy?" And I told him no. I never really thought about that. And he says, "Well, He said, look, the process started a few months ago. They've already got the packages, but the CNO just sent out a letter, an email to all the flag officers asking for more candidates. And he said, I think you should consider it. I think, you should be one of the guys that submits this package. And I said, well, you think I should? And I said, well, do you think I have a chance? And he said, no, you don't have a chance in hell. He said you've never been a force master chief, you've never been a fleet master chief, and quite frankly, you'll probably be eliminated pretty quick. And I said, then why do it? If I'm going to throw my hat in the ring, I should have some expectation. He said, well, look, it'll highlight the program that we have here at the school. And he said, it'll show that, and who knows who's going to see that package. You might get a good follow-on assignment after it. He said, but I think you ought to do it. Think about it. And at this point, man, I was all Naval War College. I was wearing the sweatshirt, and so it's like, hey, I'll take one for the school. If it's going to help this program. So but I said, well, let me think about it, because if you ever apply for something, you might get selected. So I thought, let me go home and talk to. I told the admiral, I said, let me go home and talk to my wife. And he said, yeah, let me know. But you got to get this in. We got to. If you decide to do it, I'll be your sponsoring officer, but you got to get it in by like the end of next week or something. I said, okay. So I go home and talk to my wife, and I say, Diane, the admiral thinks I should do this, and she said, really, Master Chief of the Navy? She said, you never talked about that? I said, no, I never really thought about that. It's kind of, and she said, well, and she was kind of, I think, a little bit baffled by it all. And she said, well, what about Gitmo? And I said, look, I think I'm still going to Gitmo. I don't think they're going to make a decision right away. But she said, well, what are your chances? What do you think your chances are? And I told her what the admiral said. No chance in hell. So she said, well, if they're, why not do it then? If there's no chance, what's the harm in doing it? And so I thought about it, and I submitted my package. I put the package together. Now, word got out, just like any school or any command, word got out that I was going to put in the package for MCPON. And every student, every officer there wanted to help. So I had I had Air Force officers coming up and saying, hey, I heard you're going to do this, let me help you with this. So one of the questions in the package, one thing you had to write about is, what is the job of what does the MCPON do? And think about it. What does the MCPON do? What are it might have been a little more than that. Like, what are the duties and responsibilities in your view? What does the MCPON do for our Navy? What is the job of the MCPON? What should the MCPON be? And I didn't know how to answer that. Do any of you, if you were to have to answer that question, what does the MCPON do? I didn't know. I'd met a few MCPONs. They come through, wave, shake hands, and they're out of there. I really didn't understand what that position was all about. But it made me think a lot about it. And so I had a lot of input. So anyway, I wrote on the letter what I thought, first and foremost, the MCPON should do or be. So I'm off to Gitmo. A couple weeks later, I'm waiting for, the orders just came in, but I had a report date of a few weeks later. And so I was hanging around the War College, not doing a whole lot. And I get called to the Dean of Students' office, and they said, hey, there's a call from the CNO's office. You need to take it. And it's a Navy captain. He says, Master Chief, we got your package. The CNO wants to interview you for the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy position. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, you need to come to D.C. And I said, well, look, Captain, I'm going to Gitmo. In fact, this Thursday, this Thursday, I'm jumping on a flight, and I'm going to Gitmo. I said, does the CNO know that I already have orders? I'm going to go do this. And there was silence for a second, and then he said, few words, and then he said, Master Chief, don't you, of course the CNO knows, but you need to get over here, he wants to see you. And, you know, like, how dare I question that, you know? And he said, so you need to arrange transportation as soon as you can and get here on your way to Gitmo. Can you get here by Wednesday? You could still catch the rotator out of, Norfolk on Thursday. Amazing what you can get done by throwing the CNO's name around. I mean, everything was changed in a matter of hours. I mean, I had someone come to my house, student housing, and deliver my new travel orders. And so I've never, ever in my life had been to DC before. Flew into Reagan, and I had an old shipmate of mine pick me up. I didn't even know any chiefs stationed there. And so I had this officer that I knew that worked at the Pentagon. He was my old ops officer on the Curtis Wilbur. He picks me up, gets me settled in the hotel, and they put me up at the Ritz-Carlton. I'd never stayed at a Ritz-Carlton before. And he picks me up the next morning to do the interview with the CNO. Now, he gets me to the CNO's office and then just leaves me there. See you later. And so you're sitting out there. Have any of you been there to that office? Any of you? You've been there. So on the outside, you've been there. Yeah. So you're out, and there's kind of a waiting area, and there's a few officers sitting in the front. But it was quiet as a church there. I mean, it was just so quiet. I mean, no one looked like they were having any fun. And so after a little while, the CNO comes out, and I had never met a full admiral before. Never met a 4-star. And so, I'm focused in those 4 stars on each side of his collar, and shakes my hand, says, come on in my office, Master Chief. I walk into his office, and he had his office designed with artifacts of prior CNOs. And he had some real historic paintings in there. And so I'm standing in the middle of that office, and he's starting to talk and say things, but I'm looking around just trying to absorb this moment, because in my mind, I'm never going to be in there again. And so I'm just trying to, here I am, a guy, I started out as a deck seaman. I'm going to have a one-on-one conversation with the leader of the world's greatest Navy. How cool is that? You know what? I thought it was pretty cool. And I just want to remember it. So we sat down, we started talking, and the conversation evolves to sailors. And I talked about, sailors, and he became passionate. And, the aides were not, the time went over, and the aides were knocking at the door, CNO, you got this, and kept waving them off. But so at the end of the conversation, he says, Master Chief, what are you going to do? Are you going back to the War College to wait for my decision or how this process plays out? What are you doing? I look at him, I said, well, sir, I'm going to Gitmo. He said, you're going to Gitmo? He said, really? I didn't know that. I said, no, I told you. And so I said, as a matter of fact, sir, as soon as I leave here, I'm jumping on a plane and going to Norfolk, and I'm flying out. And he said, well, you know what? Good luck. I've been to Gitmo. It's a challenging environment. We talked about some of the leadership challenges there, and he said, and I felt good about it. I thought, this was it, and so I go to Gitmo, and at the time there was an Army general running it for until the admiral came in, the guy who just took over as Pac 3 commander, Admiral Harry Harris, good guy. And so it was all the admin, everyone in there was Army, So after I was there about a month or so, maybe 2 months. The person that was my admin person, she comes in, she said, yeah, there's someone from a CMO's office, not sure what it is. Same captain. They asked me to come back and, and do the interview again. And I said, well, I did that. They said, no, you need to bring your wife, you need to come, and, this is the second phase. And I thought, man, this thing, they're serious about this stuff. So I go back and we have another good meeting, and we talk about those things, but my focus always was, what do the Navy chiefs, what are the expectations of the Navy chiefs? What are those things? I talked about my views as what the senior enlisted, should be doing, what a Navy chief should be doing. And at the time they had, I remember one question he asked me, there was something, some of you remember it, there used to be something called a MCPON panel. You guys remember that term? Now I changed it to a leadership mess, because it is a mess. It's supposed to operate as a mess. So I did that. He asked me, what about this MCPON leadership panel? what do you think about that? He says, well, I'm not sure what they do for our Navy. And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, I don't hear, anything that comes out of that. I don't even know who's on it, and I'm not sure. And he kind of smiled. And so he said, all right. He said, I'm going to Australia. He said, I'll let you know when I get home. I'm going to make my decision before I went back. So I went back to Gitmo. And a few days later, it was just a couple days later, I get a phone call. Now, my family was still in Newport, but they had moved me into this big home there. And I was living by myself because I had a son that was graduating from high school. He calls, I get a call at midnight, some aide said, will you take a call from the CNO? And he said something to the effect, are you ready to get on with being the next Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy? I have to tell you, it was a surreal moment. It was very surreal. It was, one of the thoughts went through my mind, what did I get myself into? But it was and I don't even remember what I said. I probably babbled something, back, and we, I asked him. He said, well, we need to make the announcement because we're within a month or so of it, of having to turn over. And I asked him to wait. I said, can we please wait because my son is graduating and I don't want anything to detract from that. He had been through 9 schools. This was the last high school. He had been to 3 different high schools. And the kid did pretty well. So I didn't want anything to, anything to eclipse that. And he agreed. So we didn't announce it. I had maybe 2 weeks before it was announced before I was sworn in as Master Chief of the Navy. So fast forward about 5 or 6 months, we're sitting in his office one day. And I said, when we're talking about the process. And he said, and I said, well, what made you pick me to interview? And, what out of all the people that, because he had a panel that kind of screened records, but he wanted to see a lot of them. He said, I liked your answer to the question of what should the MCPON be or do, whatever. And I kind of smiled. You know what I wrote after writing? Because it's at the War College, man. You write papers like crazy. After writing 4 or 5 pages, I came back and I thought, what first and foremost, what should the MCPON be? A good chief. That's all I wrote. And he said, I liked your answer. You're a chief first. So your role, no matter what job you have, what title someone bestows on you, you never stop being that chief. You're always that. You first and foremost, you are the Navy chief. And from the newest chiefs that are in this room today to the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, you have the same responsibilities to our sailors. Same, no different. That responsibility, there is no light between those responsibilities. How you do it may be a little different, but the responsibility is the same. That's what makes us who we are. That's what makes us so unique. That's why you can have a chief's mess where the most junior voice in the mess is heard and the weight is carried as much as the most senior person in the mess. That's what makes us. And the leadership of knowing your sailors, engaging with them, having the credibility, it's twofold. It's being credible in your rate, knowing your rate. You got to know your rate or you have no credibility. Now, some of us, we get senior, we get a little rusty as a rate. I thought I was dangerous as an HMCM. I was much better off going into another direction, but I still understood it. I still engaged with it. They still look to me for that development of it. You don't step away from it. So you got to have that credibility in knowing your rate. And number 2, you have to be that deckplate leader that knows your people and understands the essence of what it means to be a Chief Petty Officer. For those of you that went through the process this last time, you learned what chiefs do. You had training, you learned what chiefs do, but that time, that interaction is what creates that bond in understanding the essence of what the chief's mess is about. And at the same time, you're learning they're learning your strengths and weaknesses as you're going through the process, so they know how to support you once you become a full member of the mess. So I congratulate those. Can I see a show of hands of who are the newest chiefs here? Oh, there's a few of you in here. Well, congratulations to all of you. Welcome to the newest chiefs mess. I tell you, if I can go back to any time in my career, I would go back to being that new chief. Because after that happened, everything else just opened up to me. It's what you do with it. it's not where you think you're going to end up or where you want to be and trying to do that. It's that time. The things that I miss the most is that camaraderie and the mess. And you know, I think you have more difference in the lives of your savers than any policy or any regulation that comes out in DC. You do. You directly affect their lives. You are the difference between their success or failure. And you can only influence that by that constant Deckplate leadership. So that term Deckplate leadership had been around for a long time. We had just drifted so far away from it. I felt we needed, and I said this publicly, we needed to reset the mess and get back to what the Navy expects of chiefs and that proud tradition of service that has come to define who we are in our community. And that's what it's all about. So it's good to see so many of you here today. I enjoyed the interaction. And now, if you have any questions, I mean, fire away.
Brad Wilcox.